Well, keen followers, which basically means my sister, hi Joe, you will know that I've been up in the ante on my winemaking efforts this year. So my previous kind of hobby scale winery has been upscaled to craft scale winery. I'm going to be producing about 1,000 bottles, and we've given it a name, Howl and Grappa. And if you've been following, you'll know that I'm making 3 wines this year. I'm making a still wine that we made for the first time last year, but I'm making that again called Supernova. I'm making an orange wine called Electron, which again made a small batch last year, but up in the scale this year. And I'm making Fizzy Bum Bum for the 4th time, but for the first time I'm making it all on my own in my little micro scale craft winery. And if you have been following, you might have picked up that the start of harvest didn't go well for me. All is okay now, ferments are all running fine, everything's tucked up and everything's going nicely. But I thought, conceivably, you might like to know what went wrong, know the kind of highs and lows of small scale winemaking, and I'd also tell you something about making a pet nat and what makes it a bit sort of fly by the seat of your pants, and say a little bit more about what's involved in that. So I think what went wrong, what didn't go well, is largely due to my inexperience and dealing with a larger volume of grapes and juice that have been pressed for me, because I don't have a press here big enough to press a ton of fruit, which is what I was dealing with. So I had it contract pressed and I transported it in basically a massive bag in box. So I had some challenges based on inexperience in handling those volumes, having woefully inadequate equipment for the job, and doing it on my own with only kind of like half an idea really what I'm doing. A lot of theory, but doing things practically for the first time with unfamiliar kit and against the clock, because you've got to get things going quickly, particularly given that I had a 5-hour drive to bring the fruit and juice back. So I won't dwell on those, lots of challenges there. I had some challenges with the fruit as well. I mean, no criticism of the fruit, but just things that winemakers have to deal with. The juice was more turbid than I'd anticipated, so it had more suspended solids in it. Hadn't had enough time to settle, so that the juice was as clear as I've been expecting. So that produced a few sort of handling challenges. So it was all quite sort of stressy on the day, and I found myself at 2 o'clock in the morning still de-stemming grapes. And then the key challenge that occurred after that really was that the fermentation started to run really hot and really fast. And being a tiny scale winery, I don't have temperature controlled tanks, which larger wineries will often have. And what that does is that it means your ferments are running at a nice kind of cool, consistent temperature, and they don't run too quickly. And the issue, if it runs too quickly, although some people do choose to run hotter and faster for a particular style of winery, but when you have a hotter fermentation, and you're talking about differentials of only 2 or 3 degrees here, maybe not even that much. But the difference is that some flavour compounds that you might want to preserve are actually volatile, and they can quite literally burn off in a hot, fast fermentation. So whereas Fizzy Bum Bum last year that I made with Solaris ended up being all kind of like mangoes and bananas and tropical fruits like that, they were all possible because they were done in a nice steady temperature controlled tank at about 13-14 degrees for most of the fermentation. In my stainless steel tank here with no temperature control, other than me engaged in a futile effort trying to cool it down with frozen bottles of water, didn't work at all. That ran at about sort of 17 degrees, and it peaked for a few hours across a couple of different days at 19 degrees, which just means that the flavour of it now, still in tank, compared to the same time last year, is much more sort of, grapefruit. It's more tart rather than mellow and soft and tropical. So I don't know quite what that means yet. We'll have to see how it evolves. It probably means I'll have to make some sort of different winemaking choices along the way to see what I now do with that wine. It's not that it's going to be bad, it's just going to be different because it's not what I was expecting. And because I am so inexperienced, it just gives you a few more question marks about what's the right thing to do. And the key challenge that the fermentation running hotter and faster presented was that you have to catch pet nats at just the right moment when you're bottling it. So what you're looking to do is catch it just before fermentation finishes, and you bottle it at that point. And what that then means is that the fermentation finishes in the bottle, the CO2 that's produced from fermentation's got nowhere to go, it's trapped in the bottle, it saturates the wine and it makes it gently fizzy. But you've got to be pretty precise, because if you bottle it too soon, you'll end up with too much pressure in the bottle, and when you open it, it's going to tend to gush, it'll erupt from the bottle. And if you bottle it too late, you'll end up with a flat, still wine. So, a little bit of wine science. So, the key bits of kit that you need as a small-scale winemaker are test tubey thing, thermometer, hydrometer. So the thermometer is essential because you can just gauge the temperature of your ferments, and also the use of this for the kit, the hydrometer, is dependent on the temperature of your wine at the time. So for this to be accurate, your wine or your wine sample's got to be at 20 degrees. So you've got to manage your samples quite well, bring it up to temperature if you want an accurate reading. And then this hydrometer, what you would do, you'd have a sample of wine in the tube there, make sure it's at 20 degrees, you pop your hydrometer in, give it a little spin so that no bubbles adhere to it and give it artificial buoyancy. And the hydrometer then will sit at a level that tells you how much sugar is left in the wine. That's what this little device will measure. And when you get to a point where your sugar's pretty much gone, that gives you the indication that you are approaching the end of fermentation. And you probably can't see it here, but the gradient markers here are fine, it's indicative, it gives you a sense for you're getting close. But then what you would do is you would back it up with a more precise test to test your residual sugars, so you knew exactly where you're at before you bottled it. Now, because my fermentation ran so quickly, I wasn't ready for it. So my test kit to do this more precise residual sugar test hadn't arrived. My good friend Salvatore, winemaker extraordinaire, was going to come and teach me how to do it, because it's actually quite a technique. You know, not many people do their own residual sugar tests, apparently. Didn't know that. So I hit the point where my fizzy bum bum was really at the point where it needed bottling, or it was going to be a still wine, but I didn't have the kit to do a residual sugar test, didn't have the know-how to do it, and all I had to go on was an indicative but not entirely accurate hydrometer reading. So basically it all ended up being a bit too risky, not least because I was a bit indecisive trying to decide what to do, and because I'm going to be bottling on my own and was woefully unprepared. Probably would have taken me about 6 hours maybe to bottle on my own with a kit that I had to hand. And of course the position of the wine when you reach bottle number 600 versus the position of the wine at bottle number 100 could mean that at some point when I get to the end, actually I've lost the moment and I'm basically bottling a load of cloudy still wine. So I decided not to bottle, and we will be using a different technique this year to make fizzy bum bum, and there are options open to us. But what we won't be doing is what we've done in previous years, which is using the interruption method to make a pet nat, which is what I described to you. You bottle it and interrupt the fermentation. So there are other techniques available. There is something called col fondo, which is another traditional, quite ancient style of sparkling wine. And there's even the option I could go for the traditional method, like proper English sparkling winemakers and champagne winemakers. And there's another method that you can use to make pet nat, which is called the intermission method, which involves reintroducing some sugar through the form of grape juice at some point down the line. But I'll talk about those a different day. So hopefully that's not been too tedious and too dull and hearing my tales of woe. What I did do, I did bottle just a few experimental bottles to see what would have happened if I'd have been brave enough to just bottle on the basis of my little hydrometer reading being at 997, which, might have been okay. So I bottled a couple just to see if I'd have been really brave and really bold, how would they have turned out. I've done a white and a rosé, you can see there. The rosé has been made by just blending in 5% of Rondo, which I haven't done just for the colour. Like I say, because this year my Solaris has come through with more kind of grapefruit notes and it's lost some of those sort of bolder fruit flavours. I just thought I'd see what would happen if we added in a little bit of Rondo red wine into the fermentation to just bolster some of those fruits. And on the taste test, when I did the little blend in a test tube, I really quite liked it. So anyway, I've got a few months now to see how that works out. I've got a few months over the winter while the wine settles and I decide what to do with it in the spring and which direction I'll take it in to make a sparkling wine. So so watch this space. It's all good fun, isn't it? All part of the journey, all part of the learning experience. And whatever happens, come this spring, there will be, for better or worse, a fizzy bum bum number 4. Be afraid.